Once upon a time, in a small village surrounded by golden fields and gentle hills, there lived a hard-working farmer. His name was Aaron, and he was known across the village for his honesty and dedication. Every morning, before the first ray of sunlight touched the earth, he would wake up to the sound of the rooster's call. The air would still be cold and misty, and the faint smell of damp soil would fill the air. Aaron would stretch his arms, take a deep breath, and prepare for another long day of work. He lived in a tiny mud house at the edge of the village. The house was simple: 2 rooms, a thatched roof, and a small backyard filled with plants and tools. Yet it was always neat, and there was a sense of peace in every corner. Behind his house was a narrow dirt path that led through the fields and up to a distant well, the only source of clean water in that area. Every morning, Aaron carried a long wooden stick across his shoulders. At each end of the stick hung a clay pot, tied carefully with ropes. One of the pots was perfect, shiny, smooth, and strong. It had never leaked a drop of water in all the years Aaron had used it. The other pot, however, had a small crack running down its side. It wasn't big enough to break the pot, but large enough for water to drip out slowly as Aaron walked back home. Still, the farmer never replaced it. Every morning he filled both pots at the well and started his journey back, his feet leaving faint prints on the dusty road. Birds would begin to sing. The wind would rustle through the trees, and the golden sunlight would spread across the fields. The rhythm of his footsteps and the soft sloshing of water became a song of their own, steady, peaceful, and familiar. But not everything was peaceful for the 2 pots. The perfect pot, proud of its flawless shape, often looked down at the cracked pot. It couldn't help but notice how much water the cracked one lost every day. While it reached home full and proud, the other pot was always half empty. One morning, as the farmer began his walk back home, the perfect pot glanced sideways and said in a mocking tone, "Look at you. You're always leaking. You can't even hold what you're given. What's the use of being carried if you can't do your job?" The cracked pot stayed silent. The farmer, walking calmly, didn't say a word. The birds kept singing, the wind kept blowing, and water kept dripping softly from the little crack, drop by drop, forming a tiny trail behind them. Every day, the same thing happened. The perfect pot teased and laughed. The cracked pot said nothing. Over time, those words began to hurt deeply. It wasn't just water that leaked anymore, it was confidence, pride, and happiness. Every drop that fell to the ground seemed to carry a little piece of its heart. Days passed. Weeks turned into months. The cracked pot grew quieter and sadder. It began to hate itself, feeling like a burden to the kind farmer. It noticed how hard Aaron worked, walking miles under the sun, carrying the heavy load without complaint. And yet, half the water it carried never made it home. One morning, as the farmer bent down to fill the pots at the well, the cracked pot could no longer hold its emotions. Its voice trembled as it finally spoke. "Farmer," it whispered softly. Aaron looked up, surprised. "What is it, my friend?" The pot hesitated, water trembling at its brim. "I'm so sorry," it said. "Every day you work so hard, and every day I fail you. I have a crack. Because of it, I lose half the water before we reach home. The perfect pot is right. I'm useless. I'm broken. You should have thrown me away long ago." For a moment, there was silence. The only sound was the gentle splash of water and the rustling of the trees. The farmer's face softened. He smiled and touched the cracked pot gently, as though comforting a child. "Oh, my little one," he said softly. "You think you're broken? You think you failed me? Don't worry. Tomorrow I will show you something, and you'll never feel useless again." That night, the cracked pot couldn't sleep. It thought about the farmer's words again and again. What could he mean? What could there possibly be to show? It tried to imagine, but all it could see in its mind was water dripping from its side and vanishing into the dirt. The next morning, as the first light painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, the farmer set out again with both pots. The air was cool and dew sparkled on the grass. The cracked pot still felt nervous, unsure of what was coming. After filling both pots at the well, the farmer lifted the stick onto his shoulders and began the walk home. The cracked pot, remembering what Aaron had said, decided to pay close attention to its surroundings. As they walked along the familiar path, the cracked pot noticed something it had never seen before. On its side of the road, tiny green shoots peeked out of the soil. A few steps later, those shoots turned into small plants. And then, as the path stretched ahead, it saw colors, bright, beautiful colors. There were flowers everywhere. Red poppies, yellow marigolds, pink daisies, all blooming in full glory, swaying gently in the morning breeze. The cracked pot gasped in wonder. The sunlight made the petals glow like jewels. Butterflies fluttered around, bees buzzed from flower to flower, and the air smelled sweet and alive. For the first time in a long while, the cracked pot forgot its sadness. It watched the flowers with joy and pride. Each drop that had once felt wasted now seemed to have meaning. Yet, by the time they reached home, the pot looked down again. Half its water was still gone. "I still failed," it whispered sadly. "Even after seeing all that beauty, I still couldn't do what I was made for." The farmer placed both pots down on the porch. He smiled, wiped his hands on his shirt, and looked at the cracked pot lovingly. "My dear friend," he said gently, "do you know why those flowers grow only on your side of the path?" The cracked pot looked up, puzzled. "Why? Why only on my side?" The farmer's eyes sparkled with warmth. "Because I have always known about your crack," he said softly. "Many months ago, I planted flower seeds all along your side of the road. Every day, as we walked back from the well, you watered them without even realizing it. All those drops you thought were wasted brought life to those flowers. They grew tall and beautiful because of you." The cracked pot was silent. Its heart swelled with emotion. The farmer continued, "I wanted you to see today what I've been seeing for months. You thought your weakness made you worthless, but your crack has made the world more beautiful. Look at the colors, the fragrance, the joy you've given me and everyone who passes by that path. You didn't fail me, my friend. You made my world brighter." Tears of joy rolled down the cracked pot's side. They shimmered in the sunlight like little pearls. It finally understood. Its crack, which had once been a symbol of shame, was now a mark of purpose. From that day on, the cracked pot never felt broken again. Every morning, as the farmer filled it with water, it would look forward to the journey home. It would let the water fall drop by drop, knowing each drop was nurturing something beautiful. It was no longer embarrassed. It was proud. The perfect pot, too, began to change. Watching how the farmer cared for the cracked pot, it slowly realized that perfection wasn't everything. The perfect pot had always done its job flawlessly, but it had never created life. It had never helped flowers bloom or brightened anyone's path. One morning, it spoke softly to the cracked pot. "I used to laugh at you," it said with shame. "I thought being perfect was the only thing that mattered. But I was wrong. You've done something I never could. You've made this world beautiful." The cracked pot smiled, a soft glimmer running down its side. "We're both useful in our own ways," it replied. "You help carry water, and I help grow flowers. Maybe perfection isn't about having no flaws. It's about finding meaning in them." The days continued, and the seasons changed. The path that led from the well to the farmer's house became a magical sight. Travelers who passed by would often stop and admire the flowers blooming along one side. Some would pick a few to take home. Others would simply smile and walk away, their hearts lighter. The villagers began to call it the flower path. Children would run along it, laughing and playing, their little hands brushing against the petals. The cracked pot became a quiet hero in the village, a symbol of beauty born from imperfection. Sometimes, late in the evening when the day's work was done and the sun was sinking behind the hills, the farmer would sit outside his house with both pots beside him. He would watch the golden light fall on them and smile to himself. "You see," he would whisper softly as if speaking to the breeze, "everything has a purpose. Every flaw hides a blessing. You just have to look closely." The cracked pot would rest quietly, glowing in the fading sunlight. It no longer saw the crack as something ugly. It saw it as its story, a story of patience, of kindness, of unseen purpose. The farmer's faith in it had changed everything. What once felt like a burden was now a gift. The water that used to slip away unnoticed now bloomed into colors that filled the world with joy. And as days turned into years, the cracked pot aged gracefully. The flowers kept blooming season after season, and the villagers never stopped admiring them. Many would ask the farmer how such beauty came to be on that path. He would only smile and say, "It's the work of a pot that didn't give up." The story of the cracked pot spread through the village and beyond. It was told to children as they sat around the fire at night, their eyes wide with wonder. It was shared by travelers who carried it to distant lands, retelling it in their own words. And with each retelling, it reminded people that sometimes